again, we want to thank you for being on the call today with Monica Rebella, CPA and president of Rebella Accountancy, which is a CPA firm that specializes in accounting, tax, and consulting services for hundreds of dentists in California. The topic of our call today is the new paid sick leave mandates and related hot topics for today's dental practice. If you're not a current client of Rebella Accountancy or you have not met her, Monica Rebella is a CPA and has 27 years of accounting and tax expertise, which includes 13 years working with the Big Four, Big Eight firms and over 13 years experience working with dental practices. She's a past president of the Orange County, Long Beach chapter of the California Society of CPAs and is a member of the AICPA. She has conducted training sessions for accounting firms as well as lectured on tax and business matters to the California Society of CPAs, UCLA Dental School, and the Orange County Dental Academy. She runs her own firm in Tustin, California, providing accounting, tax, and consulting services for over 300 businesses throughout California, specializing in dental offices and small businesses. Monica, welcome to the call.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thanks to everybody that's on tonight. I know this is a hot topic because it starts tomorrow, and all of us that run our own firms, we're all shaking our heads. We're all trying to figure this out. So we're pleased to have Anita York with us tonight. She is trying to finish up and help those that need stuff by tomorrow, so we're really thrilled to have her. As Jeff mentioned, Anita is a partner at the law firm of Scott & Whitehead. She specializes in labor law, so this is right up her alley, employment law, and she specializes in working with dentists, so she has a lot of experience working with dentists. Anita has a lot of years that she had before coming into law as a business owner. So she was very aware of what all the issues were that she thought is employment until she went to law school and found out, oh my. So she has been involved in owning a business, being part of a business, and now is helping us on this side as to what we need to know and how to do it right. So Anita, I'm turning it over to you because we have a lot to go through this evening.
That we do. So Monica's heard me do this program a couple of times now. It seems like this is all we talk about these days. And let me start out by saying if you are confused now or you are confused an hour from now when we're done, you are in very good company. This law is the most poorly written law I've seen in my 18 years of practice. Lawyers can't figure out what it means. Payroll providers can't figure it out. Even the DLSC, which has issued some FAQs, has avoided the most sensitive questions because I suspect even they don't know what the answers are, and yet as of tomorrow they'll be responsible for enforcing this wonderful new set of laws. So here's what we're going to try and do tonight. We're going to go through the mandatory sick leave laws. We'll spend about 80% of our time on that. We're going to go through what it requires and, in particular, what it means for dental practices, taking into consideration, of course, sort of the usual outline of a dental practice, which is, an owner dentist who's usually working, sometimes associate dentists who are working, sometimes hygienists who are working, front office, back office, and benefits typically play out differently for all of those folks. So we're going to talk about how this new law affects those positions and how you might look at providing the mandatory leave in the best ways possible. There's two ways to provide the new sick leave. One is the grant method, one is the accrual method. So we're going to talk about which method you should use for which employees and which situations. Again, we're going to spend about 80% of our time talking about the mandatory paid sick leave law, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about PTO and vacation leave because so many questions come up about PTO and vacation when we're talking about the new sick leave laws. So we're going to talk about whether or not PTO vacation policies will fulfill the new mandates, what the differences are in terms of the rules for sick leave versus PTO or vacation, and then talk about whether you should provide PTO and or vacation separately. Provide PTO or provide separate vacation and sick leave. Different employers, different dental practices are making all different decisions. So ultimately, of course, the decision is up to you. So let's start with a little bit of preliminary stuff. First of all, I do want to refer you to some online resources as you're thinking about the things that you need to do to comply. The first one is the DLSC poster. The DLSC is what's called the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement. It's what most people refer to as the Labor Board. There's a new poster that you are supposed to put up, on that bulletin board where you have things that nobody ever looks at. There's a new poster. If you purchased or received for 2015 one of the new big plastic posters, it probably provides what you need to provide. But if you didn't, Google this DLSC paid sick leave poster. You'll get it. It's a one-page thing. Print it out. Make sure you get that up there tomorrow or as soon as you can. The second item, the revised notice to employee. When you are hiring new employees, you are required to complete and provide to them a document called a notice to employee. That document has been revised a couple of times since it first came out, and most recently was revised at the end of last year to include some of this paid sick leave stuff. So you must be using the most recent version. You can get that by Googling revised 2810.5 notice to employee. 2810.5 is just the labor code section that provides for it. If you ever have insomnia and you can't sleep and you'd like to read the new law, you can just Google AB 1522. And finally, the DLSC FAQs, I mentioned before that they don't answer a lot of the questions that they have, but they do answer some questions. So if you're trying to figure it all out and you think that maybe you might find an answer there, you can Google DLSC paid sick leave FAQ. And they do update the FAQs. They've updated them every few months or so. So, if you looked at them a year ago and didn't quite get it, maybe there's some things that are on there now that you didn't see before. So just so that you know, as of January 1st of this year, so 6 months ago, you are required to have the poster up and you're required to be using that new notice to employee form. As of tomorrow, you're required to comply with all of the other provisions, which includes providing the sick leave, giving employees notice of the sick leave, and allowing employees to use paid sick leave. So,
can I ask you one question about that, Anita?
Sure, yeah.
So payroll companies are saying that it must be on a pay stub. Is that true?
You have two options. Putting it on the pay stub is the easiest way to comply. So what the new law is telling us is it must either be on the paycheck stub that you provide to employees every payday or some other written document that you provide to employees every single payday. So if you don't have, the ability or haven't had time to put it onto paycheck stubs, you can just provide it to them in writing. You can provide it to them via email. If you have electronic payroll stubs where you don't actually provide paper copies, but employees can go on to their electronic account and look at what their sick leave balance is, that also is in compliance.
Great, thanks.
Good question. Okay, so let's start with to whom does it apply? Does it apply to you? The answer is probably yes, because it applies to all employers regardless of size. Now, there are a couple of very specific exceptions, none of which apply to dental practices. So if you have one employee, it applies to you. To which employees does it apply? It applies to all employees, and this includes your temps, who will work for you for at least 30 work days within the year. So let's be specific. It means that it applies to all associate dentists who usually don't get these kinds of benefits. It applies to all hygienists who also oftentimes don't get any paid leave benefits. It also applies to every single part-time employee if they will work 30 days in the year. Now, what that really comes down to is if they are going to work about once every 8 days. So, for example, if you have an associate dentist who comes in twice a month, 12 months in a year, twice a month means they'll work 24 days in the month. It will not apply to that individual unless that individual fills in for a vacation or fills in for other people when they're absent, then it may get to the 30 days. But that's kind of the general numbers that you can think about in terms of evaluating whether your employees will qualify. Now, we talk about temps because the law very specifically requires you to provide it to temps just like you do other employees, again, if they will work for you for at least 30 days within a year. So, for example, if you are open 5 days a week, you have a chairside assistant who's going out on pregnancy leave and she's going to be out for 3 months. That means that temp is going to work for you for, I should have done that in weeks, let's say 12 weeks. So that temp is going to work for you 5 days a week for 12 weeks straight. Monica, do the math for me. 60 days?
60 days, yes.
60 days. That temp has worked for you for at least 30 work days. Therefore, the sick leave benefits that you provide to your regular employees must also be provided to those temps. if you happen to hire a temp through an agency whereby that agency is actually paying the payroll of the temp, then presumably the agency will provide the paid sick leave. You don't need to, but you want to make absolutely sure that that temp agency is doing so, because if they're not, both you and the agency can be held liable. Now, with dental practices, oftentimes you guys go through an agency, but that agency does not actually have the employee on payroll. Rather, you pay the temp, and then you pay a fee to the temp agency that referred them. In that case, that temp is your employee, and the rules do apply.
So, Anita, so they have to keep track of how many days their temporary people or people that don't work full-time are working for them, because if you've got a hygienist working 1 day a week, you've got to keep track. If you don't want them to hit the 30 days a year, they've got to keep track of it near the end of the year, right?
Well, I think what you want to do is really anticipate at the beginning of the year what the expected schedule is, and of course, schedules can change, so you may need to revisit it in both directions. So, for example, as you said, you have a hygienist who works 1 day a week, 52 weeks in a year. Let's assume she's going to take a couple of weeks off for, the holidays or for vacation, or she calls in sick one day. She still is likely going to work something like 45 to 50 days in the year, because we've got 52 weeks in the year. So you should anticipate that that person will work the 30 days and provide them the sick leave benefits that are applicable to that category. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, if you have somebody who's only working, say, every other week, maybe someone who comes in on call and only works a couple of days every few months, chances are they're not going to hit the 30, and so I would begin by presuming that they won't, and then exactly as you said, track it, watch it, make sure that you know, because if they hit that point, you're going to have to do some backtracking and retroactively apply the benefits and kind of make up for your mistake in miscalculating or mispredicting how much they were going to work in that year. Okay, what do we have to do to comply? I already mentioned briefly there's 2 ways to give paid sick leave. The first way is we grant it. The second way is that we accrue it. I'm going to talk about both of those in some detail. But let me start by saying the grant method is by far the easiest way to do it. It's the least expensive for any employee who will work at least 2 days per week. You'll understand why a little later, but the break-even is about 15 hours per week. If somebody is going to work 15 hours per week, even 14 hours per week or more, you're better off to do the grant method, which I'll talk about in just a moment, than you are to do the accrual method. If you have somebody who's working less than 2 days per week, so less than 14, 15, 16 hours per week, then the accrual method will be less expensive, probably, but it's definitely far more complex because there are many moving parts, many pieces, which, as Monica knows from hearing me talk about this before, make absolutely no sense, but we'll get to that in probably 5 minutes. Okay,
and
so let's start.
To trump you just briefly is that if you already have paid time off, we don't do the sick time paid leave on top of paid time off.
Maybe we do, maybe we don't, and we're going to get to that probably in about 30 minutes. Okay. But I will definitely be talking about that because that's one of the big questions that comes up. So what is the grant method? The grant method says, under the new law, employees must be granted not less than 24 hours of paid sick leave benefits to use each year. Now, what I mean by granted is, boom, they get them. They get them at the beginning of the year. So right now, the new law has to go into effect as of tomorrow. Therefore, you might want to run your year for sick leave benefit purposes from July 1 to June 30th, in which case you'll grant them 24 hours of sick leave benefits starting tomorrow that they can use any time in the next 12 months. So down to our next bullet point, granted sick leave does not have to carry over. So at the end of that 12 months, in my example, I've used July 1 to June 30th, so next June 30th, you can have a use it or lose it policy. Whatever you haven't used goes away, and July 1, you get your 24 hours again, starting fresh. Or one of the things we're doing with a lot of our dental practice clients is what I'm calling a use it or cash it out policy. It is absolutely not required that you cash any of it out. You can have a use it or lose it. It doesn't carry over. You just get 24 hours each year. That's that. But many dental practices, particularly smaller practices with small staff numbers, so for example, one front office, one back office, one hygienist, one dentist, it's really hard when people are out sick. And there's a concept that if an employee knows or thinks that, hey, I am entitled to my 3 days of sick leave and by gosh, I'm going to use it, then they're going to call in sick and they're going to make sure that they get their 3 days off. On the other hand, if they know that they're going to use it or it will be cashed out to them at the end of that year, there's a little bit more incentive to not call in sick unless they're truly sick, because they're not going to lose the benefit. Instead, it will be cashed out to them. So again, completely the employer's discretion. Do whatever makes the most sense to you. When you're granting benefits, you can have a use it or lose it or a use it or cash it out policy. Now, granted sick leave must be provided as of the very first day of employment, but you can have it be not available for their use until the 90th day. Now, it would have been easier if they just said a 90-day waiting period, but what this really means is it's an 89-day waiting period, so we're having to draft policies that say it's available for use as of the 90th day. Now, Monica knows that one of the issues that has come up that's a problem because we don't have an answer is, okay, well, let's say that I want to grant it on the very first day they start work, and then I'm going to say use it or lose it, and every anniversary date I'm going to grant it again. But I have to start the policy tomorrow. What do I do with that? How do I shift it from tomorrow's start date to their anniversary date if I want to use the anniversary date? And the answer is we don't know the answer. The law did not provide for prorating, even though that's the only thing that makes any sense. So let me throw out a few options. One option, which is what I call the zero-risk option, is go ahead and grant them 24 hours of paid sick leave tomorrow, and then grant them 24 hours again on their anniversary date. Now, that's a real bummer if their anniversary date happens to be August 1st. That's a month from now. But it can be use it or lose it, so if they haven't used it this month, then it will go away and they'll start again. That's option one. It's the zero risk. You can't lose. It's just going to cost you potentially some money. Option two, which I think would work, I will argue all day long it will work because it's the only thing that makes sense to me, but I cannot promise it will work, is you grant it on a prorated basis. So tomorrow they get prorated benefits until their anniversary date, and then on their anniversary date they get their 24 hours. So, for example, we have our employee with an August 1 anniversary date. At 24 hours per year, employees are actually being granted 2 hours per month. So I would grant them 2 hours as of tomorrow that can be used anytime in July, and then 24 hours as of August 1 that we're now on their anniversary year cycle. Again, there is some risk to that because the law does not tell us that we can do that. But in my opinion, it's the only thing that makes sense. It just does not make sense that employers would have to give 24 hours tomorrow and then 24 hours again on August 1st. But we don't have an answer. The third option that we're doing with some of our clients is we're sort of combining them both and saying, okay, as of tomorrow, we're giving you 26 hours. So we're taking the 2 hours that would have been for July. We're taking the 24 hours that would have been as of August 1. We're giving you all 26 hours as of tomorrow and telling you that is going to be good until your August 1 anniversary date in 2016, so in other words, for 13 months. Again, I can't promise that that's lawful because we have no clear guidance in terms of what to do, but I think that that works. All right, so an example of the way a policy might be written that is a grant method policy is the following. Beginning on the first day of employment, all employees are granted 24 hours of paid sick leave benefits per year of employment. Sick leave does not roll over from year to year, but starts over on the employee's anniversary date each year. Now, I want to make clear this is not an entire policy. This is just the one piece that sort of narrates how the grant method works. So don't think that, all I have to do is take these two sentences, put them into place, and I'm in compliance. You won't be in compliance because there are more pieces to it that we have to actually put into place. But this is sort of the explanation of how the grant method works. All right, second way we can do paid sick leave, the ever-confusing, complicated accrual method. So by definition, accrual means employees accrue it or they earn it over time as they work. What the rules are under the accrual method are the following. Employees must accrue it at a rate that is not less than 1 hour per 30 hours worked. So if you say you're open 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, you work 8 hours a day, so employees generally work about 32 hours a week. That means they're going to accrue it at just over 1 hour per week, right, because it's every 30 hours worked. Accrued sick leave must carry over, so you cannot have a use it or lose it like we did with the grant method. It must carry over with an accrual cap of not less than 48 hours. Now, I want to make very clear, this is not an annual accrual cap, so it's not 48 hours per year cap. It is an anytime you reach the 40 hours, you've hit your cap. So if you're working 40 hours a week and employees are on the accrual method, they're going to hit that cap at about the 7th month. If you're working 4 days a week, they're going to hit a little bit later than that. But at whatever point they hit 48 hours, you can say it now freezes and you never accrue more than that. So that's the accrual cap. In addition to that, you can have what we're calling the use cap. So even though they're accruing up to 48 hours, you can impose a cap that says they cannot use any more than 24 hours per year. So unlike the accrual cap, little Freudian slip there, unlike the accrual cap, this is an annual cap. Okay, I know you're confused. There's good reason you're confused. This is all very confusing. So with the accrual method, we have 3 pieces. They earn it at the rate of 1 hour per 30 hours worked. You can have a maximum accrual cap of 48 hours, and you can have a maximum use cap of 24 hours per year. Again, similar to grant method, it must be provided from the first day of employment, so they begin to accrue on day 1, but we can have a waiting period such that the sick leave benefits are not available for use until the 90th day. Similar to the grant method, you do not have to cash it out, but you cannot have a use it or lose it. It must carry over until they reach that 48-hour cap. Now, sick leave always, as long as it's being treated as sick leave, we have the option of not paying it out at termination either. So let's look at what an accrual policy might look like. Again, this is just the beginning of a policy. This is not a complete policy. Beginning on the first day of employment, all employees accrue paid sick leave benefits at the rate of 1 hour per 30 hours worked. Employees may use up to 24 hours of paid sick leave benefits per year, and the maximum accrual cap is 48 hours. I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about when you would want to use the grant method and when you would want to use the accrual method from a financial perspective, but as I'm sure you've surmised by now, you might want to use the grant method anyways just because it's so much easier and cleaner. And in my opinion, the more complicated something is, the more likely there is to be mistakes. All right. Remember what we said at the beginning, all employees, this includes both temps and regular employees who will work at least 30 days in a 12-month period, must be provided these paid sick leave benefits. Okay, so let's talk about when you might want to use the different policies. So we have full-time and part-time employees. Can we have different policies for different employees? Yes. So for example, when I'm talking about the money only, and we're talking about which one are we best off financially speaking, employees who work 2 days or more per week might be granted the 24 hours of sick leave each year, and employees who work less than 2 days per week, you may want to have them accrue sick leave at the rate of 1 hour per 30 hours worked. Again, as I mentioned before, 2 days, actually about 14 to 16 hours is where that financial cutoff is. Now, you might also have a policy that provides more sick leave. You can always provide more. The numbers I'm talking about now are just the minimums. So you can have a policy that provides more than that for non-producers. You might want to provide a full week for your front office or chairside assistants than you do for producers, associate dentists and hygienists, as long as everyone gets at least the minimum. Obviously, it's usually, I won't say always, but it's certainly usually much more detrimental to a dental practice to have your producers off work, whether it's for sick leave or for other reasons, and they're highly paid, so it has certainly been an industry standard that associate dentists and hygienists either get no paid time off or they get less time off than the other employees. You can still have it where they're getting less time off, you just cannot have it where they're getting no time off. All right, how may sick leave benefits be used? They may be used for time off due to the employee's illness, injury, or health-related appointments, which includes dental appointments, or if the employee needs to take time off to provide care for a family member who's ill or injured or take them to appointments, and also for what we call the crime victim leave. Leaves, it should be plural. There are statutes under the California Labor Code that provide certain time off for employees who are the victim of certain crimes, stalking, sexual assault, other violent crimes. So when you're giving time off for those purposes, employees can actually use the sick leave benefits for those purposes. By the way, and I will talk a little bit about pending legislation that's going to change potentially some of the variables in these new laws. The legislation is pending. It keeps getting changed. They haven't passed it yet. So when it comes out, it may be different than what I'm going to talk about. But one of the things that they are looking at is potentially expanding the reasons that you can use sick leave benefit. For example, allowing employees to use it for what's called school leave. So you may be aware that in California, if a parent or someone who's raising the child needs to be off work because the school is saying your child's in trouble, we need to have a disciplinary meeting with you, the pending legislation would allow employees to use sick leave benefits for time off for that purpose. But it hasn't passed yet. Okay, additional requirements. We'll just run through a few things very quickly. Monica already raised the issue, but I'll remind you, available sick leave must be tracked on paycheck stubs or other written documentation that is provided every payday. Minimum increments for use may not exceed 2 hours. So this is a little bit confusing. Let me be very clear. There are some of the older policies. If you have an old handbook, it might say something like PTO or vacation or sick leave must be used in minimum half-day increments. And we used to do that because tracking time off just was a problem when you're figuring out someone was off for an hour and a half or someone was off for an hour and 45 minutes. Now that many dental practices are using electronic timekeeping systems, and many employers are using timekeeping systems that do the math for them, this is not as much of an issue. So if you have one of the old policies that says something like must be used in minimum half-day increments, that becomes illegal as of tomorrow. You cannot require employees to use it in a minimum increment that is any greater than 2 hours. And oftentimes we don't even put in a minimum increment at all. Again, we have the electronic timekeeping. We're not worried about the math anymore. And by the way, you can have a minimum requirement that it's a minimum of 2 hours, but the employee gets to decide if and how much of their sick leave benefits to use. So I'm going to be off work tomorrow morning for a doctor's appointment. I come in at 11 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, so I've now had 3 hours off. I am permitted to say I do not want to use my sick leave benefits towards that appointment. I want to save them. So that's a bummer because employees can take unpaid time off now for sick leave purposes and still have their sick leave benefits available to them.
Wow.
Yeah. Along those same lines, and also another big wow, is that employees may request paid sick leave verbally or in writing. Now, this doesn't mean the time off. If you have a policy that says you must request time off in writing, that's fine. You can still have that policy. But they can inform you verbally or in writing if they want to use their benefits. So if you happen to be running down the hall to a patient that you're late to see and Johnny says, by the way, I want to use my sick leave benefits for my time off yesterday, apparently that's enough. You're supposed to remember that and do it. What I'm doing with our policies, because I don't favor allowing employees to have time off unpaid and still save their benefits, is I'm writing them so that they say that paid sick leave benefits will be applied to time off for sick leave purposes unless otherwise requested. So it's what I'm calling an opt-out policy rather than an opt-in. So instead of saying, employee, you need to tell me every single time whether or not you want to use your benefits, I'm writing it so that the default is we'll apply them, but all you have to do is tell me that you don't want to, and we won't. My hope is that most employees won't bother to remember whether or not they should be telling somebody, oh, I don't want to use my benefits, and more of the benefits will be used so that they're not saved up. Now, an employer cannot request detailed information as to why the employee is off or require a doctor's note in order to use sick leave benefits. So let me take those one at a time. You cannot request detailed information as to why. you all know better than I that HIPAA protects patient confidentiality. That applies to employers also. So no matter why an employee is off, they don't have to tell you specifics. They can say to you, I'm ill today. They can say to you, I have a medical appointment today. They can say to you, my child was ill. They do not have to give you specifics, and you may not ask for detailed information. Only they're ill or they have a medical appointment, their child is ill, things like that. Second part of that, you cannot require a doctor's note in order to use the sick leave benefits. So this is a tricky one because oftentimes the only time we request a doctor's note is A, when we don't believe the person, we think they're lying, or they're sick a lot, they seem to be absent a lot, or when they've been absent for an extended period, say 3, 4, 5 days, and okay, we want to know that you have a doctor's note that not only provides that you were out, but tells us that you're okay to come back to work. You can still do that because you're not requiring a doctor's note in order for them to use their sick leave benefits. You're requiring a doctor's note for another permissible reason. So we do not write policies that say if you don't bring a doctor's note, you won't get paid your sick leave benefits. That would be unlawful. You can still require it for other reasons. Okay, this is one of the most difficult pieces of this for dental practices if you pay either your dentist or your hygienist based on production or collections. Here's the deal. When you pay sick leave, you pay it based on the employee's current rate of pay, which is easy if they're salaried or if they're hourly. What is the current rate of pay if they have what we call variable rates of pay? For our purposes right now, I'm going to talk about production or collection-based compensation. The way you have to do it is you take a look at what they earned in the last 90 days. You take a look at how much they worked in the last 90 days. You divide the compensation by the number of hours, and that gets you the hourly rate for that individual that will be applicable to that sick leave day. So I call in sick tomorrow. I would normally work 8 hours tomorrow. You take a look back at the last 90 days. How much did I earn? How many hours did I work? That's my hourly rate. Multiply that times 8 because I would have otherwise worked 8 hours tomorrow, and that's what you have to pay me for my sick leave. The new pending legislation does give us some other alternatives. We're hoping that passes. I'm not going to get into what those other alternatives are now because they keep changing what they are, so it would serve no purpose to further confuse you. The bottom line is for now, you must provide sick leave to everybody, and for anybody who gets collection or production-based or variable rates, you must do that calculation. This would also come into play, for example, if you provide hygienists a certain rate of pay when they have patients and a lower rate of pay when they don't have patients. You can either pay out the sick leave at the highest rate, because nobody's ever going to complain that you paid more, or you can take a look back, figure out how much they earned, figure how much they worked, do the math, and pay them based on that blended hourly rate, so to speak. Okay, so this slide really just recaps what I've said. What does it mean for dental practices? If you pay based on production or collections, figure out the total amount paid in the last 90 days, divided by the total hours worked. That's your hourly rate to figure out what to pay that individual. Now, when you're looking back at the last 90 days, by the way, the statute does say that the last 90 days of full pay periods. So you don't need to start doing math to figure out partial pay periods and how much would they have earned, even though they didn't get paid that pay period. So you just look at the 90 days of actual full pay periods.
Wow, this is just bringer's sweat to me.
I'm telling you, Monica's probably going to have to hire another employee just to be taking all the calls to help people figure out how much they have to pay in sick leave. Now, I will tell you the other piece of this that I suppose this was the gift. If somebody calls in sick and you need to do that variable rate or that collection or production calculation, you can actually pay the sick leave on the next paycheck. So if I'm sick tomorrow and I would normally get paid a week from tomorrow, you can pay me that sick leave day later, the next pay period, which gives you more time to figure it out. So there you go. They gave you that gift.
So you get one pay period extra to calculate it.
Yeah, that was such a better way to say it. Okay.
But if you have a payroll company, what do you have to tell that payroll company?
Well, you're going to be telling the payroll company, you're going to be manually telling them. So, for example, if it's a dentist, you're just going to tell them whatever they've earned, and that's that for that pay period. And then because we're going to take the extra pay period to do the math. So then the next pay period, you'll tell them, okay, they earned this much for this time plus, please pay them, $729.87 in paid sick leave.
And they have to provide some kind of a calculation on that pay period and how they came up with that calculation.
The law doesn't tell us that we have to, but certainly you would want to if you think it's going to be questioned. So whatever math calculations you do, I would absolutely save those. I would put them either in the personnel file, or if you have a separate payroll file, I would absolutely maintain those so that if it's ever questioned or it's ever challenged, more importantly, you can say, look, here's my worksheet, here's the math I did.
So all they need to get per pay period is what's been accrued or granted minus what they've used. So really all they need per pay period is here's what you got left, but how you calculated the amount that they got is not required.
Correct. Exactly right.
Okay.
Additional requirements. So we're through the hard part in terms of the math and the moving parts and all the complicated variables. So now we're just down to some of the nitpicky rules. You may not discriminate or retaliate against employees for using sick leave. This is where I want you to be careful when you're asking for that doctor's note. If you're asking for a doctor's note and you don't have a good reason, the individual could claim that you are doing it to discriminate or interfere with their ability to use their sick leave. So be careful about those notes. Have a good reason. For the most part, I would say avoid asking for it just because you don't believe them. Have a better reason. So I'm asking for it because you never show up to work on Mondays. So from now on, I need a doctor's note when you're not here on Mondays. Or you've already been off 17 days in the last 2 months. Now I'm going to need a doctor's note when you're not here. Things like that. Or certainly if they're gone for a long period of time, I'm out for a week, I'm out for 2 weeks, not only would I ask for a doctor's note, I'd also ask for a doctor's note releasing them saying, yes, she's healthy enough to return to work. But you may not discriminate or retaliate. Employers cannot require employees to find their own replacement workers. This is not usually an issue with dental practices. This is really put into place more for restaurant workers and for some retail stores that do require employees to find their own replacement. Employers must reinstate unused sick leave if an employee leaves and then is rehired within 1 year, so within 1 year of the date. This is mostly going to come into play if you have paid interns that you use perhaps during the summer. This happens sometimes with pediatric practices where they bring on an extra person. Sometimes they get them from the schools and hire them for the summer. So let's say somebody works June through August, and then let's say you bring that same person back next June. Well, they left in August, so you're bringing them back 10 months later. That means whatever sick leave they had not used, it gets reinstated, and they don't serve a new 90-day waiting period. Whatever time they had worked before, that applies to the waiting period. So basically, with respect to sick leave, they pick up right where they left off.
But they still have to have had worked 30 days or more a year.
Right. So again, if you're working 5 days a week and they work for you for 3 months, you're going to hit that. If they're only going to work for you for 1 month, they're not going to hit that unless they're working every single day.
Does it always have to be a fiscal or anniversary date? Can it be calendar?
It can be calendar. It can be July 1 to June 30. It can be anniversary. The current legislation actually does not make that completely clear, but the DLSA FAQs tell us that we can, and the new legislation does clean that up, and it tells us that we can, which brings me back to my point. If the DLSE and the new legislation says it's okay to do, then how else could you possibly do it other than prorating? But going back to that same problem. Okay, there's no private right of action. This is the only good news in this whole mess. Is an employee cannot actually sue you in court yet. All they can do for now is file a claim with the Labor Commissioner. Now, they can file a claim with the Attorney General, but trust me, the Attorney General couldn't care less. The Labor Commissioner, on the other hand, will care and will pursue a claim. So if an employee is unhappy, they can go to the Labor Board, the DLSC. They're not going to be able to sue you. The cleanup legislation does not change that. However, I wouldn't be surprised if in the years to come we don't see that changed.
So here's a question.
Yes.
Let's say we totally get it wrong for 2015, and we finally get clarity in 2016. How far back can the employees go to sue us?
Well, they're only going to be able to go back to July 1, 2015.
Okay.
Because it didn't go into effect until now. And there are multiple remedies, but what I would say is if it looks like somebody's going to be unhappy and is considering going to the labor board, let's just figure out what it is they want and write them the darn check, because no matter how you look at it, it's probably not going to be that much money unless it's an associate dentist or hygienist who's paid based on collections or production, and then, of course, that could be a lot of money. Or even, a hygienist who makes $400 a day, 3 days, that's $1,200. So that's a chunk of cash, but probably better off to pay it than to deal with the DLSC. And in the years to come, we will see probably DLSC opinion letters. We'll see hopefully more FAQs. We're actually hoping to see regulations issued, which would actually then be law, not just FAQs, as to how all of this works. We had hoped to see some regulations before July 1, but I think we haven't seen them because nobody knows yet how it's all going to work. I suspect that in the next couple of years we'll see regulations. Not that that helps any of us tomorrow. Okay, so back to Monica's question or issue that she raised a bit ago. If you have a current PTO or vacation plan, can we use that to fulfill the requirements? And the answer is yes, as long as it does fulfill those requirements. So what I'm hearing from a lot of my dentists is that, in fact, I just 3 hours ago talked to somebody and they said, my hygienist came to me and said that as of tomorrow I have to give her paid sick leave, but I already give her 2 weeks a year of PTO. Do I have to give her sick leave also? And the answer is no. So it's a common misconception that employees have, because of course they don't pay attention, they just hear what they want to hear, which is I get more time off, that you must give sick leave even if you have a vacation or PTO plan. So let's talk for just a minute about PTO vacation. Let me back up for just a minute. So PTO or vacation plan can be used to fulfill the mandates as long as the policy meets all of the requirements, but in reality, most do not. So your options will be then to either tweak your plan, we modify the plan so that it does meet the requirements, or we add sick leave. Here's the ways in which it usually does not fulfill all the requirements. Within dental practices that have PTO and vacation plans, they oftentimes do not provide for temps, do not provide for hygienists, do not provide for associate dentists, and do not provide for part-time employees. So all of those people who are oftentimes left out of your PTO or vacation plan, we now need to provide for it. In addition, PTO or vacation plans often provide that when employees are first working for you for the first, say, year, maybe 2 years, they are accruing PTO at the rate of 1 week per year. Remember we said they must accrue at not less than 1 hour per 30 hours worked. That comes to more than 1 week. So if you have a plan that says the employee accrues based on 1 week per year for the first year or two, that is not going to be sufficient to fulfill the requirements under the sick leave plan. Therefore, we either need to do a modification to it or add some sick leave benefits. But let's talk for a minute about PTO, vacation, because I get the question a lot, what's the difference? The truth is there's absolutely no difference other than psychologically. So people think of vacation as that's what I use for my vacation. If I want to go to Disneyland, if I want to take a week off, I use my vacation. Psychologically speaking, people think of PTO, which stands for paid time off. Sometimes it's personal time off. But they think of that as benefits I can use for any purpose. The truth is you can use either one for any purpose most of the time. And there are very specific sets of rules that apply to a PTO or vacation policy, identical, whether it's a PTO or vacation policy, but very different than the rules that apply to sick leave policies, and especially now that we have these new mandates. So there's no requirement whatsoever that you provide PTO or vacation, unlike sick leave now, but most practices do. And if you do provide it, then you must follow all of the rules applicable to PTO or vacation. So what are those rules? First, they must accrue. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule in the following sense. You can grant them, but you must grant them in advance. Now, we've already talked about that with paid sick leave. If you do the grant method, you grant it in advance. I grant you 24 hours of sick leave, which you can use any time in the next 12 months. the important piece to the sick leave is the employer has a choice of cashing it out or use it or lose it. Not true for PTO vacation. If you grant PTO or vacation, you do not have the option of use it or lose it. You must pay it unless they use it. The reason this is oftentimes a problem is because employers are oftentimes providing far more than just 24 hours a year of PTO or vacation. They're usually giving a week or 2 weeks. So if you're granting it and you have to grant it in advance, let's say I hire Monica on January 1st. Let's say on April 1st I decide it's not working out, I'm going to let her go. I granted her her PTO vacation when she started. I must pay all of it to her because there's no use it or lose it when it comes to PTO or vacation. So that's why it's usually disadvantageous to grant PTO vacation benefits in advance. Now, the problem that I see in a lot of older policies is they say something like the following. Employees get PTO benefits once a year. After 1 year, you get 1 week. After 2 years, you get 2 weeks. After 3 years, you get 3 weeks. That is actually an illegal policy because they accrue it as they work. So that policy would be lawful if it said employees accrue 1 week of benefits the first year, they accrue 2 weeks of benefits the second year, they accrue 3 weeks of benefits the third year. If somebody terminates employment mid-year, they get whatever they have accrued through that date. We run into this a lot with the older policies. So if you have one of those policies that says at the end of a year you get a week vacation, we need to fix your policy. It's out of date and illegal. With PTO vacation, what you do have is the ability to still have a waiting period to use it. So we can put in the 90th day if we're going to be using our PTO or vacation to fulfill the sick leave requirements. If you have sick leave in addition, so we're not using it for that purpose, then you can have a waiting period as long as you want. You can have a 1 year waiting period if you want. They accrue it, but you can have a waiting period before they can use it. Again, like sick, you can have a maximum accrual cap. If we're using our PTO or vacation to fulfill the sick leave mandate, then the cap is 48 hours. That's not an annual cap. It's just a 48-hour cap. You can have a higher cap if you want, no problem at all. It just cannot be a lower cap. If you're not using PTO or vacation to fulfill the sick leave requirements, then the accrual cap has to be at least 1 year. It can be more than that if you want. Okay, a couple reminders. If PTO or vacation are provided in lieu of paid sick leave, your policy must follow both sets of rules that I just talked about. No use it or lose it, must carry over, be paid out, plus all of the sick leave mandates. For some dental practices, the advantages of using PTO vacation to fulfill the mandates are good. For some practices, they feel like, no, I'm much better off to keep them separate. I just want to do the 24 hours of sick leave, keep it simple, and I don't want to change my vacation plan at all. I want to leave it as is. So just depends on what your preference is, what you want to do. But when we're looking at the policies, of course, we make sure that they're up to date, that they're lawful, that they're doing what they need to do, both to provide the employee benefits that you're trying to provide, but also to make sure that you're not going to get in trouble because, in my experience, most dental practices are pretty darn generous with their employees, but being generous is not the same thing as doing things lawfully. And I hate to say it, but the more generous you are, if you're doing things unlawfully, the more you're going to get dinged if somebody decides to file a claim against you. So we're wanting to make sure that your policies are up to date, that they're in compliance both with the new law as well as with the existing laws. I almost always end my programs this way because it applies to almost every topic I talk about. If you have a good current employee handbook, that handbook should do that for you. That handbook should make sure that your policies are in compliance with the law, are in compliance with what you want to be providing to your employees, and explains to them how it all works. So a good employee handbook is a very powerful tool if it's a good employee handbook. It ensures that you're complying with the rules like the PTO vacation sick leave rules, provides most of the legally mandated notices, communicates your expectations, answers employees' questions. It will help you when you're trying to make decisions. Somebody wants a medical leave, what do I do? Somebody wants a baby bonding leave, what do I do? Somebody just told me she's pregnant, what do I do? It should help you to know what you're supposed to do and enable you to enforce your policies and your procedures. From my perspective, the things that we lawyers like is that it's going to be evidence that you comply with the law. If you call me and tell me that somebody's complaining that you didn't give them the right pregnancy leave or you're not giving your meal periods the right way, the very first thing I'm going to say to you is, do you have a good employee handbook? Can you email it to me so we can see what policies you have in place? Because it's either going to work for you or it's going to work against you. I have had employees tell me that they've attended programs where the attorney says, if you have a bad employee handbook, it's better to not have any at all. Therefore, the people who call me tell me they don't have any employee handbook because they're worried. That's not a good answer. The good answer is get a good employee handbook, because no employee handbook it's never going to be a good answer. It is going to be an important tool for you, both in terms of your day-to-day practice and if we ever have any claims we need to defend. The other thing we lawyers love is we love at-will language everywhere so that you can't get sued for breach of contract, and a good employee handbook will always have that good at-will employment language. So you may have some questions. It's remotely possible at the end of this discussion you have some questions. Jeff, I'll ask you just a minute if we have any, but before I do that, I don't want to forget to mention I'm always happy to do a 15-minute consult for free. You can email me at ayork@employerlaw.com, or you can call me. I will tell you honestly, if you call me right now, you're not going to get me on the phone. I am jamming with policies, and I'm having my staff actually schedule people to talk. I don't usually do that. If you call me in 3 or 4 weeks, that probably won't happen, but that's what I'm having to do right now because otherwise I'm just not getting anything done. So, but always happy to answer questions if I can and see what we can do to take care of you. So, Jeff, do we have any questions we want to answer now?
Thanks, Anita. I've opened up the phone line so that if you do have a question, just go ahead and speak up, and I'll check on the Internet to see if we have any come through there.
Thanks.
Anita, great job. This is all I ever tell my clients is it is very complex, and I tell my staff this too because clients call us. It's incredibly complex. We can't even begin to tell you how this works. You need to talk to New York. We give them your phone number because anything we can say can be wrong, and it is complex. Even figuring out, I'll do the easiest. I'll grant it to them. Well, that's great. Well, how much are you going to grant them? And
right.
How are you keeping track of that?
Exactly.
And
how much are you going to pay them?
How much are you going to pay them? And if you've got, and every dental practice has got a hygienist that's got a different schedule.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
It's just so complex. And the other thing that they're coming up with is some people don't have a payroll service. They're doing it through QuickBooks or some other way.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
And they're trying to figure out, where in there do I put it so that when I'm paying it, it's the sick pay payout? And
yeah.
It's really confusing.
Yep, it is confusing. I agree.
Well, Anita, I do not see any questions on the Internet. However, again, the phone lines are open. We have several people on the phone with us, so if you do have a question, just go ahead and say something. And if I don't hear anything, Anita, it sounds like, once again, you've covered every possible.
Actually, I suspect that they've written down the phone number or they're already drafting an email because the questions are probably more complex than we can cover tonight. So,
how does it apply to independent contractors?
The problem with independent contractors is oftentimes they aren't legally classified as independent contractors. So here's my very short version of that. If you have an associate dentist who is basically working at your practice, doing the same thing you're doing, you're a general dentistry practice and it's a general dentist who's an associate, that person is misclassified as an independent contractor. That means that you need to be giving them sick leave as well as doing all sorts of other things. On the other hand, if you have an independent contractor who really owns their own business, runs their own business, maybe they're a specialist, maybe you're a pedo practice and it's a dentist who does sedation. They come in for you once a month. They do the same thing for 20 other general dentistry practices. They bring their own assistant. They bring their own equipment and supplies. That is a bona fide independent contractor. You do not need to give them any sick leave.
And
any other?
There was one question. They were going through this. Let's say that they are a bona fide independent contractor. It's a specialist that comes in once a month. and he goes to a lot of different places, or she goes to a lot of places, or even an ortho or a pedo or something.
Sure. Yeah.
And they've got their own S corporation, but the only employees are themselves and their spouse and maybe their kids.
Right.
Is this an exception, or do you have to provide sick leave for your
family? Well, that's a great question. It does come up. You have to provide sick leave to everybody. There are no exceptions, but what I'm telling people is if it's just not going to make any difference, because I'm not going to sue me, and I'm not going to not pay my wife when she doesn't come to work. What I'm telling people is just put 24 hours on the paycheck stub. So if the DLSC ever wants to do an audit and say, show me every single one of your paycheck stubs, they can do a glance down and they'll see 24 hours. Then if you're out sick and you think of it, dock yourself for the 8 hours of paid sick leave. Your pay's never going to change. You're going to pay yourself exactly what you want to pay yourself. But again, the DLSC can do their little audit and the paperwork will show what it needs to show.
So it'll be a use it or lose it. It just sit there, it goes away, you put it back on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I almost don't even care if you dock it or don't dock it. Just stick it on there so that they'll see it if they're doing the audit.
So do it as a grant all up front, and then it just...
Right, for you, for your spouse, for your kids.
And it's a lose it thing, so the next year 24 hours go on there, and then
it
goes away. Okay.
Yeah, and if you have an outside payroll service, they're all having you fill out paperwork to tell them how you want to do it. So just put your name on it and say, grant it, every July 1st, grant me 24 hours, use it or lose it, and then it will automatically happen.
Great.
Anita, we do have two questions. One's from Orange. It is appropriate to look at projected RDH scheduled hours for the year divided by 30, and then that is the required sick leave pay number of hours.
No.
Okay.
So you're looking at that's two different things. So you're looking at whether they're going to work 30 days in the year simply to determine if they qualify for paid sick leave. That's a yes or no question. Let's say the answer is yes, they do qualify. So you pick whichever method you're going to use, either accrual or grant. Let's say the RDH works for 6 months and then she calls in sick, and you pay her based on collections, which, by the way, has its own potential legal ramifications, but that's for another day. Works for 6 months, she's out sick. How much do I pay her? Because I pay her on collections. At that point, you look backwards 90 days. So let's say she goes out on June 1st. She's out for 1 day. So on June 1st, you look back 90 days. That's May, April, and March. How much money did she earn during that time? How many hours did she work during that time? Divide the amount that she made by the amount that she worked. That gives you her applicable hourly rate for that day off. Multiply that hourly rate by the number of hours she would have worked, and that's what you owe her for that sick day.
To help, Anita, we didn't have the slides available before the presentation. These slides, which have how you need to calculate it, that Anita went over, will be available in the next couple of days, right, Jeff? So by the end of the week, we will have these slides posted out there for people to download and print.
So is the slide not showing up as we were going through the program?
It's showing up, but they can't print them.
Oh, got it. Okay. So person in orange, if you're still online, I just clicked back to slide number 17 that gives you the math, what you need to do when you're paying somebody who earns at a variable rate.
And if you're patient, by the end of the week, we will have these so you can print them off so you can see that calculation again in writing how you calculate it. And
page 18 just sort of recaps it, but page 17, I think, explains it better.
And Anita, if you're listening, if there are people listening online right now, on the screen in the upper left-hand corner, there's the navigation box. Fifth one down is download Anita's slides in a PDF. You can click there and download the slides. They are available for everybody that's on the call live.
Perfect.
And I'll also mention the call to action button just below that is the free 15-minute consultation. If you want to, and again, you're listening live, you can click on that right now. It takes you to Anita's website, and it has her contact information and the consultation page on how to get a hold of her also. So that's a direct link to her information on the web.
Well, good. So if you get PDF, then you can print them from there if you can save them and print them. Perfect.
Going back to independent.
Go ahead.
Going back to independent contractor question. So I'm an orthodontist, but I don't bring any instruments. I don't dictate my schedule per se, but the corporation does. So, but I am still classified as independent contractor with that company. Am I entitled pay sick leave from with that company, or is that not the case?
It's a bigger, longer evaluation as to whether you're a bona fide independent contractor or whether you are misclassified as an independent contractor. So I really can't answer it. And I will tell you honestly, I'm also not going to answer it because I advise employers, and I don't know if the person who you work for is one of my clients. So it would be a conflict of interest for me to tell you specifically whether or not you are misclassified.
Okay.
And Anita, I did email you. There were 2 questions. You answered the first one. There's a second one there. If
okay, let's see. Can I prorate from July 1 to December 31 and give 1.5 days of paid sick leave and start the 24 hours? I think you can. I cannot promise you that I'm right because the law does not tell us what to do. But since the DLSC has said you can do it on a calendar year basis, I don't see any other way possible that it would work other than one of 3 ways. One, exactly what you've said here, prorate from July 1 to December 31, give 1.5 days or 12 hours. And then on January 1, you'll give the 24 hours. That's option 1. Option 2, you can give 24 hours now and then give 24 hours again on January 1st, which means the employees get twice as much for 2015. I don't think that makes any sense, but if you want to be zero risk, absolutely for sure doing it, that nobody could ever say you did it wrong, that would be the way. Option 3, I think you can give 36 hours as of July 1. It goes for 1.5 years, and then they will get it again on January 1, 2017, so 1.5 years from now, in 24 hours per year. So I would do it one of those 3 ways, and I think that it should work. All right, we good to go?
Good.
Thanks, everybody. Again, you can email me or give a call if you have questions. If you call in the next couple of days, you'll get scheduled to talk next week.
Well, happy 4th of July to everybody. Anita, again, I know you're so busy. Thank you for doing this with me.
My pleasure.
Jeff, thank you. Hope everyone has a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.